Hello everybody, welcome to Haiku Talk. I am your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. And today we're going to take a look at a haiku from the latest issue of Frogpond from Annette Makino. I believe I got that last name right. If not, I do apologize, Annette. With the first line of News Barrage. That's a good one. So, as always, sit back, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's haiku. Okay, welcome back. It's good to see you. Good to be back with you again for another episode of Haiku Talk. In this episode, as I said, we're going to look at a poem with the first line of News Barrage. And that poem goes like this. News Barrage. I lose my husband to the war. News Barrage. I lose my husband to the war. It's a very nice piece. And it's an interesting one. And one that I find great delight in how lines 2 and 3, this does use the fragment and the phrase. Line 1 is the fragment. Lines 2 and 3 are the phrase. And how the phrase provides a little bit of a twist in it to me. We'll get into that in just a moment. But what I like about haiku, and something that a haiku does, and senru does, is there is that aha moment, or you might also refer to it as a moment of surprise, where when you get to the end of the piece, end of the poem, it has a twist for you. And in this one, in my opinion, it has a nice playful twist. The subject matter may or may not be playful, but the way that it goes about doing what it's doing, I find playful. And as somebody that reads a lot of these, I always get excited when I see something that does something a little bit different, or at least subverts my expectations in a surprising way. And there are a lot of great poems in this issue. Not to take away from any of the other ones, but this one just kind of stuck out with me and felt like a good thing to talk about on the channel. And again, Frogpond is the journal for the Haiku Society of America, and do check them out right above. So let's look at this line by line and talk through about what's going on and how it works. So the first line of this poem is News Barrage. News Barrage. Now, it's a line, it's kind of straightforward. We understand that there's a lot of news happening, and you're being barraged with it. Now, as a good first line, it piques our interest, at least piques my interest, because it gives me something to chew on, but it doesn't tell me what the news is. So I immediately recognize the first line, I go to someplace mentally specific, and then I'm left wondering, well, what kind of news barrage is this? And I'm compelled to read on to line 2 and 3. So good job, line 1. Line 2 goes like this. I lose my husband. I lose my husband. Now this line is an intense line. It's taken out of context by itself, I lose my husband, means kind of one or two things. You could either lose them, like lost in a store, or lose their attention, lose their direct connection with you in a temporary sort of way, or you lose them completely in that they die, or it could be a divorce. There's a big direct break between the husband, the relationship here between the I of the poet and the husband of the poet. And so that's kind of a very dramatic line, potentially. Or it might be kind of a not dramatic line, but in the sense of a news barrage, lots of stuff happening on. I lose my husband. I'm really curious because there's some sort of stakes here. What are the stakes that are being presented of losing the husband in the middle of a news barrage? And then we get to line 3. And line 3 is, to the war. To the war. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can read this. And my first reading of this was to say, and this might be yours as well. I'll cover another potential reading of this in a moment. But the initial one was, Annette, the eye of the poem has lost their husband, lost their significant other, lost their loved one to the news barrage because they're engulfed in it and they just won't stop watching TV or looking online or consuming this news. And so all of the focus of that, in this case, the husband of the poem, is consumed by the news, and nothing else is getting done. No other attention is being sent to the eye of the poem, and you're just sort of lost. Now, this is where I find it kind of playful and amusing, because it could be, it's just as much could be I lose my husband to the basketball tournament or to the cricket tournament or the golf tournament, something that's happening on TV, something that takes their attention away. And that sort of playful pull of not being present, the husband not being present with the eye of the poem because they're pulled into the news barrage is, I don't know. For me, I'm just kind of amused by the idea of being sucked into the news. Now, I myself can get sucked into the news. I've really sucked into a lot of news that's going on right now here in the United States, as well as in the global stage, following the war in the Ukraine and so on and so forth. So I can definitely see myself on both sides of this coin, and I guess I was kind of amused by that as well. And so because when I got to the end of that third line, I was like, oh, that's the news barrage. Oh, that's why this husband thinks this is important. Oh, that's why they're glued into the TV. And when I say amused, it's not amused by this. It's not because I'm amused of the subject that the husband is pulled into, that they're pulled into war. It's not that, because that is important. That is very serious. That is something, understandably, that you're going to get sucked into. But it's the idea that somebody is calling attention to the fact that the husband is no longer paying attention to them because something that's going on in the news barrage. As far as relationships go, that gets into some sort of a playful area for me. And that's, again, me personally. Now, I'm sure others out there have different opinions on this. This takes them to a different place, and that's great. That's valid. Please comment below on where this took you. Be curious to see where you go with this. On the flip side, the darker side of that is, in a news barrage, we live in a world where this very well could happen, where another reading of this is, in the news barrage, you actually see your loved one being lost in the war. They're on TV. You see that happen live. And with the media landscape that we have these days, that's a possibility, and that's terrifying and frightening in a very darker place that this poem can take you. And, I really, really like that this poem has many avenues that you can tread down to find meaning in it. And for my initial kind of chuckle of a reaction to the very dark one of actually seeing someone that you love die on the screen because it's in the news barrage, the fact that it can go to those extremes for me and my reading of it, as well as the number of other possibilities that you can take to this poem, it makes me respect the poem even more and makes me look at the poem even more deeply. And so that's why I wanted to bring it to the attention here, is that you can play with the poem should play with expectations a little bit. You should have room in your poems to get the reader to get to that aha moment or get to the end of the poem and realize, that's what we're talking about. Oh, I didn't expect the poem to go here, but here's where it went. And sometimes that can be in a positive way. Sometimes it can go a very dark way. And it's also okay if your poem can have two extremely different possibilities of meaning on very different ends of the spectrum to be valid in the same poem. That's good thing. That means the poem's really doing its job well. And I really liked this piece because of that. So keep that in mind if you're writing your own poems, or if you're as you're reading things. If you get to the ends of the poems and you're finding yourself, oh, I didn't expect it to go there. The poet's trying very hard for that response to occur, and they're using, in this case, the fragment and phrase to get you there, as well, and just playing with expectations. If you take off that first line, that fragment, and you just have the phrase, "I lose my husband to the war," that really only pulls in one direction for me. Really only pulls to a serious, dark direction, that the husband is lost to the war, meaning is a casualty, a physical casualty to the war. But with that first line at the top, news barrage, it suggests the fact that the losing of the husband is not actually by being dead in the war, but by being pulled away, consumed by this news barrage of the war. And in that case, since it's a media event, you could substitute war with any number of other things and have it also ring valid. And that's kind of where my mind went initially when I realized that, the news barrages of the war. And I was thinking, oh, geez, all the other things of the news barrages that can take you away from the people around you, or that can take away people around you from you because they're hooked in the news. Anyway, very nice poem, Annette, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well, dear listeners, dear viewers out there. So with that said, we're going to close up this episode. Please like this in your little browser. Click the thumbs up if you do like this episode, and think about subscribing if you haven't subscribed already. And if you do all of those two things, think about ringing the bell to get notified when new episodes come about. All of those things do help the channel to show up in the Google, YouTube algorithms. But, it's great if you do. If you don't, that's okay too. Thanks for tuning in. That's the important thing. Thanks for taking time out of your day to talk or listen to somebody talk about haiku. Because this is a very valid form of poetry that in the wider world of poetry doesn't always get the respect it deserves. And that's what this channel is trying to do, is to try to help elevate its standings in the conversation of poetry, to be like, yes, this is a serious thing. Here's why. We've just spent 15 minutes talking about a very, very, very short poem in the grand scheme of things. And there's a lot happening there. And these do deserve to be taken seriously. And that is, I always feature a poem from a living poet in a brand new issue of a contemporary journal. So, helping to promote living poets, help to recognize that this is not a dead art form that only revolves around Basho, Busan, and Isa, but it's happening now with poets around the world. English language just happens to be the default language most poets write in, most journals publish in, and just trying to bring haiku awareness to the nooks and crannies of the interwebs. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying your tasty beverage, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.